Good morning to you all in Canberra, here from the traditional lands of the Anacostan and Piscataway peoples, what we now call Washington DC. I'd also like to acknowledge the first Australians, on whose lands we meet in Australia and whose cultures we celebrate as the oldest continuing cultures in human history. And my deepest respects to those joining us who belong to the stolen generations, those survivors who never cease to amaze me with their wisdom and their compassion, and to all First Nations peoples joining us today. To the Prime Minister, ministerial and parliamentary colleagues, past and present. And of course, Message Stick and the indefatigable Michael McLeod for so strongly supporting and growing this event as they have for so many, many years. It's an important occasion, I think, not because it reminds us of the events of the day of the apology itself, of course it does that, but it renews in the minds of all of us the struggle of so many courageous Australians over the decades who dared to speak the truth about our history, especially those elders from the past, without whom there may never have been an apology at all. Yet they didn't live to hear it for themselves. Those great Australians contributed to a multi-generational project for justice. They had no guarantee of success, and a lot of cause for doubt. Our generation continues that project today. We do so in the spirit of reconciliation, of human solidarity, and a sense of national progress. As I said on that day back in 2008, we lay claim to a future that embraces all Australians, a future where we embrace the possibility of new solutions to enduring problems where old approaches have failed, and a future based on mutual respect, mutual resolve, and mutual responsibility. And we have cause for optimism because, as messy as that project can look at times, we are constantly gaining a better understanding of what works and what doesn't work. I was especially pleased to see that the partnership agreement just signed with the Northern Territory and peak organisations has emphasised strengthening Aboriginal community-controlled organisations to deliver services on the ground, and also on creating and funding local groups so that local people with local knowledge take the lead in designing local services that work for them. The jury is in. Greater autonomy can deliver overall better outcomes and at lower cost. The incredible success of Aboriginal community-controlled health organisations are a case in point. They are trusted on the ground, they are accountable to their communities, and they deliver results. It's often forgotten that Indigenous populations all over the world have suffered disproportionately under COVID. That's not the case in Australia. In fact, Indigenous people are significantly underrepresented, thanks in no small part to community-controlled health sectors. But autonomy only works when individual communities feel encouraged and empowered to pursue ideas that might surprise outsiders. That means this may be a bumpy road, and I'm sure some political and media critics will be tempted to announce their hot takes about this or that development along the way. But my encouragement to potential critics is to think carefully about how they can express themselves constructively. Australians, whoever they are, wherever they live, whatever their background, want to see our country building on our successes. Another place where we've seen great self-determination in action has been in the business sector. Something my government did early on was to ask a bright new MP to look at establishing a body to back Indigenous entrepreneurs and get them in front of corporates, not as charity cases, but as competitive and dynamic suppliers. This was being advanced by Michael McLeod, who had seen similar models work overseas. And that young MP who chaired that inquiry was a bloke called Richard Marles. You might have heard of him. In fact, I've just had him here in Washington, DC. Since then, Supply Nation has made real, meaningful change in so many lives. They've recently signed up their 5,000th supplier, one business, one family, one community at a time. I've spoken about elders past and present, so I'd be remiss not to talk about those who are now emerging. To be frank, I never cease to be impressed and inspired by the young First Nations Australians whenever and wherever around the world I meet them. I have no doubt whatsoever that they make their elders feel very proud. In the room today, I know we have Tia Rigney and Thomas King, who are scholars through the Australian Indigenous Education Foundation. And I'm glad that Michael's Message Stick Foundation and the government are working together to mentor and empower First Nations youth. There's plenty of work to do. The apology was never the end. It was only the beginning. The apology goes hand in hand with closing the gap. They are inseparable. They are two sides of the one coin. But the apology wasn't inevitable, and neither is closing the gap. Progress is happening before our eyes precisely because across our society, people are working to make it happen. So we honour those who led the way in the past, and we gain hope and inspiration from those who are now lifting up the torch for the first time. By looking unflinchingly at our past, our history, warts and all, even when it's uncomfortable, we learn about ourselves in the present. Just as we look unflinchingly to the future and those young people lighting the pathway ahead for us. Thank you all. I wish you the absolute best for today. The apology was the beginning of the long project called reconciliation. And as Martin Luther King in this country has reminded us, the arc of history bends slowly towards justice.